This boy be in my DM say I'm pretty. This boy be in my DM say I'm pretty.
17-year-old girl was killed by her 17-year-old boyfriend just 3 weeks after she gave birth. We now have his arrest affidavit. It includes brand new details, including the painful fact Kea Hood's mother is who discovered her dead body.
It's 10:30 in the morning on a Sunday that started out warm and ordinary. You just heard a sound you can't explain. Not a slam, not a shout, something sharper. Something that doesn't belong in a quiet house on a Sunday morning. You knock, nothing. You call out a name, still nothing. You knock again, harder this time, and the silence on the other side gets louder with every second it stretches on. Before we go any further, we're making you two promises. First, this case turns on a single envelope, a piece of paper that arrived in the mail days before this moment, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what it said and why it mattered enough to change everything. Second, a teenage boy was in that room too, and the choices he made in the 25 minutes before that sound will follow him for the rest of his life one way or another. We're answering both of those questions today, and we're not going to rush either one. The woman knocking on that door is a mother. Her daughter is on the other side of it. She's already tried the handle. She's already called out twice. Now she does the only thing left to do. She runs. Out the front door, around the side of the house, toward the bedroom window. What she finds there will divide her life into two parts. Everything before this Sunday morning and everything after it. We're not going to show you that moment yet. Before you see what she saw, you need to know who was in that room, not as a case number, not as a headline, but as a person. 3 weeks earlier, this was a very different house. A newborn girl slept in a bassinet pushed up against a shelf lined with dance trophies, an odd, sweet collision of two different chapters of the same life. Her mother, 17-year-old Kea Hood, had just become two things at once. She was a junior at Lancaster High School and a standout on the school's competitive drill team, the kind of dancer whose coaches were already talking about which college programs might want her. And now, at 17, she was also a new mom. If you've ever watched a teenager try to hold two identities at once, the kid everyone still sees in the hallway and the adult responsibilities piling up at home, you know how much quiet strength that takes. Kea wasn't hiding from either identity. Friends say she rocked her newborn daughter to sleep while watching footage of drill team routines on her phone, whispering to the baby about the moves they'd learned together one day. She didn't see motherhood and dance as competing for space in her life. She saw them as two rhythms in the same performance. If a case like this deserves more attention than it's getting, hit subscribe now, because what happened to Kea over the next 3 weeks is exactly the kind of story that gets forgotten unless people like you keep it alive. Here's what makes this case different from a lot of the ones we cover. Kea wasn't naive, and she wasn't blindsided by a stranger. She'd been in a relationship with her boyfriend on and off for roughly 2 years. That relationship had a documented history, one her own family later described publicly as troubled, one that involved prior conflict serious enough that her sister would later tell reporters she'd urged Kea to get out and get help. Kea knew this relationship had rough edges. She still believed, on that Sunday morning, that she could sit down with him in her own bedroom, with her family just down the hallway, and have a difficult conversation safely. She was wrong about that. We want to be careful here, because this is the part of true crime storytelling that's easy to get wrong. It would be simple to tell you Kea should have known better, should have picked a public place, should have brought someone else into the room with her. Hindsight makes every decision look obvious. But on that Sunday morning, all Kea had was 2 years of history with this person and her own judgment about how he'd react. She used the information she had. It wasn't enough. What she didn't know, what almost nobody in that house knew, including possibly Kea herself, was that the contents of an envelope she'd received days earlier had already set something in motion that no amount of careful planning could stop. She just hadn't told him what was inside it yet. By the time she did, it was 10:05 in the morning, and the bedroom door had already clicked shut, locked from the inside. What her mother found in that room, minutes later, would take police months to fully piece together, and it would take an arrest affidavit released long after the fact to explain the parts that a knock on a locked door could never reveal. To understand what happened behind that locked door, you have to go back to an envelope that arrived in the mail days earlier. Let's build this case the way investigators had to, one confirmed fact at a time, in order, without skipping ahead to conclusions we can't support yet. Kea Hood and Trayvon Wright met in high school and stayed together, on and off, for roughly 2 years. If you've ever known a couple like this, you know the pattern: breakups that don't fully stick, reconciliations that don't fully heal whatever caused the breakup in the first place. Relationship researchers sometimes call this a cyclical dynamic. And while it's common among teenagers still learning how relationships work, it can also mask deeper instability that never gets fully addressed before the next reconciliation paper's over it. According to Kea's family, that's what happened here. They told reporters there was a documented history of domestic conflict between the two of them. The specific incidents never made it into the public police report. We don't have details, and we're not going to guess at them. But the pattern itself is on the record, confirmed by the people who knew Kea best, and it matters for everything that comes after it. Here's promise number 1, delivered in full. That envelope contained the results of a paternity test. When Kea became pregnant, Trayvon believed the baby was his. For 9 months, the entire length of a pregnancy, he stepped into the role of expectant father, at least publicly. He talked about it with friends and family. He showed up. As far as the people around them could tell, this wasn't performance. He seemed to genuinely believe he was about to become a father, and he seemed to want it. That's an important detail, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. Identity researchers who study young fatherhood point out that for a lot of teenage boys, the anticipation of fatherhood can become central to how they see themselves almost overnight, a fast-tracked sense of purpose, responsibility, even status among peers. When that anticipated identity gets built up over 9 months and then abruptly taken away, it isn't just disappointing. It can feel like losing a piece of yourself that you'd already started rearranging your whole life around. Iselin was born in December 2023. At some point after her birth, a paternity test came back. Trayvon Wright was not the biological father. Her sister later told reporters, "My best advice is to leave and talk to somebody and get the help." Read that quote again. That's not something you say about a relationship that simply ended badly. That's the kind of thing a family member says when they've watched a pattern play out more than once, and they're genuinely afraid of what comes next. Kea's sister said this to reporters after the fact, but it tells you the family had already sensed real danger in this relationship long before January 7th ever arrived. According to statements Kea's mother gave to police, Kea had made a decision about how to handle the paternity test results. She wasn't going to send a text message. She wasn't going to let word travel through friends and reach him secondhand, the way bad news so often does in a small, tight-knit high school community. She decided she owed him a face-to-face conversation in her own bedroom on Sunday, the 7th of January, 2024. You have to sit with why she made that choice, because it tells you something true about who she was. She'd known Trayvon for 2 years. She trusted her own read on him enough to believe she could manage a hard conversation safely, on her own turf, with her family just down the hallway if anything went wrong. That wasn't recklessness. That was someone trying to do the respectful thing, the honest thing, in the most controlled setting she could arrange. Domestic violence researchers have a name for the instinct behind that decision, the belief that intimate knowledge of a partner gives you a kind of predictive power, a special ability to read and manage their reaction, even to devastating news. It's one of the most common assumptions people in troubled relationships make, and researchers who study intimate partner violence say it's also one of the most dangerous, because it isn't actually reliable. People change, especially under the specific pressure of losing something they'd built an identity around. Kea had no way of confirming in advance What police would only be able to piece together afterward that this particular piece of news was going to land on someone who had already spent 9 months rebuilding his sense of self around a role he was about to lose entirely. Sunday morning arrived unusually warm for a Dallas January. By 9 o'clock, Kea had already fed 3-week-old Iselin, changed her, and handed her off to her grandmother for the morning. That's worth noting. Kea made sure her daughter was safe and cared for before she did anything else that day. Unlike most Sunday mornings in that house, when music usually drifted out from Kea's room as she ran through routines, her bedroom stayed quiet. She spent close to an hour choosing an outfit, finally settling on a Lancaster High sweatshirt and jeans, and she stood in front of her mirror rehearsing words that only she ever heard out loud. At 9:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. 2 words from Trayvon. "I'm outside." Kea glanced toward the nursery, where Iselin was sleeping peacefully, unaware that whatever happened in the next hour would shape the rest of her life. Then Kea walked to the front of the house, let Trayvon in, and told her family they'd be in her room and it shouldn't take long. The bedroom door clicked shut behind them at 10:05 a.m. Locked, this time, from the inside. She had no way of knowing he'd already made a decision before he ever knocked on that door. So why would a conversation about a DNA test end in gunfire? The answer isn't just about paternity, it's about what losing that role meant to him and about a pattern researchers see over and over in cases like this one. Here's the question this entire case comes down to, and it's the question we're going to spend the next several minutes actually answering, instead of just asking, how does a breakup conversation turn into a homicide in 25 minutes? There's no single, tidy answer. Real violence rarely has one. But researchers who study intimate partner violence and domestic homicide have identified a pattern that shows up again and again in cases that look like this one. And it's worth walking through carefully, point by point, because it gives you a framework for understanding what you're about to hear. Here are 5 factors researchers consistently point to as raising the risk of violence during a separation or a major relational rupture. 1. Loss of control. When a person senses that a relationship and their influence over it is slipping away permanently, some individuals respond not with acceptance but with escalating attempts to regain power over the situation. That can look like arguing, pleading, threatening, or worse. 2. Public humiliation. A perceived loss of status in front of family, friends, or an entire social circle can function as a powerful trigger, particularly for young men whose sense of identity is closely tied to how others see them. Losing a relationship privately is hard. Losing it in a way that feels like it will become public knowledge is, for some people, unbearable. 3. Identity collapse. We already touched on this in the last chapter, but it deserves its own line here. Trayvon had spent 9 months publicly building an identity as a father. Losing that role wasn't a disappointment on the level of a breakup. Researchers who study this describe it as something closer to losing a piece of who you believed yourself to be. 4. Access and opportunity. Violence in intimate relationships escalates fastest when the person has direct, private, physical access to their partner, away from witnesses who might intervene. That's exactly the setting Kea chose that morning, for entirely understandable reasons: privacy, respect, a controlled environment. It's also, unfortunately, the setting researchers flag as carrying the most risk. 5. Prior history. A documented history of conflict within a relationship is one of the single strongest known predictors of future violence in that same relationship. And as we covered in the last chapter, this relationship had that history confirmed on the record by Kea's own family. Which of these 5 factors do you think mattered most in this case? Tell us in the comments. We read every one, and this is exactly the kind of conversation we want in this community. That's promise number 2, delivered. This case was never just about a paternity test. It's about what happens when several of these well-documented risk factors line up at the same time, in the same room, on the same ordinary Sunday morning. Now let's be precise about exactly what's documented from that morning and exactly where documentation ends and speculation would begin, because we think that line matters. And we're not going to blur it for the sake of a better story. Kea's younger brother passed by the bedroom door twice that morning while retrieving items from the bathroom down the hall. According to his statement to police, the conversation inside was tense but controlled on his first pass, sometime around 10:15 a.m. Muffled voices, an edge to the tone, but nothing alarming enough to interrupt. By his second pass, roughly 5 minutes later, the tone inside had noticeably escalated. Voices were louder. The tension had shifted into something closer to conflict. That's what's actually documented: a family member's honest recollection of a conversation he overheard in passing, not a transcript, not a recording. Investigators never released a verbatim account of what was said in that room, and out of respect for what can and can't actually be verified, neither will we. Anything more specific than tense and then escalating moves from documented fact into speculation, and we're not going to pretend otherwise just to make this scene more dramatic than it already is. What we do know, with much more certainty, comes from the arrest affidavit filed after the fact, and it's this. A firearm was already inside that room before the conversation about the paternity test results ever started. Think about that timeline for a second. The gun wasn't a reaction to what was said. It was already there, waiting, before either of them said a word. At 10:30 in the morning, there was one sound. Then there was nothing. Kea's mother heard it clearly from the hallway, the way you hear a sound in your own house that instantly tells you something is wrong, even before your mind can name what it was. She knocked. She called out Kea's name. She got no answer at all, not a sound, not a response, nothing but the silence we opened this video with. That's when she ran outside, circled the house, and found the bedroom window standing open, its screen pushed outward from the inside. You already know, in broad strokes, what she found when the door finally opened. We're going to give you the details investigators actually confirmed, not the ones a dramatized retelling might invent in the next chapter. When police finally got that door open, the room told part of the story on its own, but it would take a full arrest affidavit built over the following days to explain the rest of it. The affidavit police built afterward didn't just describe a crime, it revealed exactly how Wright got the gun and how fast his plan came together. Let's slow down here and separate what's actually proven in this case from what's still alleged, because that distinction matters in every criminal case we cover, and it matters even more here, in a case involving two people who were both minors when this happened. According to the arrest affidavit, Trayvon Wright obtained the firearm used in the shooting 2 days before he came to Kea's house, not that morning, not in a moment of impulse, but 2 full days in advance. That single detail changes how you have to think about everything that happened in that bedroom. It suggests a level of premeditation that a spur-of-the-moment argument simply wouldn't explain. Investigators also documented the open bedroom window. Its screen pushed outward physical evidence consistent with someone leaving the house quickly through the window rather than walking calmly out the front door past Kea's family. Dallas police charged 17-year-old Trayvon Wright with Kea Hood's murder. If you want to see how this case actually moves through the courts, because we're going to keep following it, subscribe now and turn on notifications. We don't want you to miss the update when it comes. Here's what's important for us to say clearly, and what we think every true crime channel owes its audience. An arrest is not a conviction. Everything from this point forward, his precise intentions walking into that room, the exact content of the conversation before the sound investigators documented, why a weapon was obtained 2 days ahead of a scheduled conversation about paternity is either alleged in charging documents or reconstructed from witness statements after the fact. None of it has been tested in a courtroom yet, in front of a judge, with both sides given the chance to present their case. We think that distinction is worth repeating, because it would be easy, and honestly, it would probably perform better to narrate this case as though guilt were already settled. We're not going to do that. The affidavit lays out a case. It is not by itself a verdict. What we can say, based on Kea's own family's account, is that this wasn't a relationship without warning signs along the way. 2 years of an on-again, off-again dynamic, a documented history of conflict, confirmed publicly by the people closest to Kea. A sister who told reporters, on the record, that she'd urged Kea to leave the relationship and get help before any of this happened. Do you think that 2-year history of red flags should have changed how the people around this relationship responded to it? Let us know what you think, and if you've seen a pattern like this play out around you, we genuinely like to hear that too. None of that history proves exactly what happened behind that locked door on January 7th. History isn't the same as proof. But it does give you the same context investigators were working with as they built this case. And it's likely part of why Kea's family says they weren't entirely surprised by what the affidavit ultimately described, even while they wait, like everyone else, for a trial to formally confirm or contest it. For a case involving two 17-year-olds, the legal process moves differently than it would for two adults, and it often moves more slowly, with additional protections and procedures built in specifically because of the ages involved. As of this video, the case remains active in the court system. We don't know the full trajectory it will take, and we're not going to guess at an outcome just to give this video a cleaner ending. That uncertainty is genuinely hard to sit with, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. You want an ending. You want the story to close cleanly, with a verdict that finally matches the weight of the tragedy that opened this video. This case isn't going to give you that today. For Kea's family, an arrest wasn't the closure they wanted. It was the beginning of a much longer, much harder process, one that doesn't end when a video does. Because for everyone who actually knew Kea, this case was never just about a courtroom outcome. Kea Hood's family doesn't want you to remember her as a headline, and honestly, neither do we. Her sister told reporters she was a beautiful soul, very vibrant, the life of the party. They want you to remember a girl who organized impromptu talent shows in her living room and taught her younger siblings dance routines she'd made up herself. A junior on a competitive drill team with real, legitimate college prospects coaches who were already talking about which programs might want her. A big sister among 8 kids who somehow made sure nobody in that house ever felt left out, who remembered every single sibling's birthday without being asked. And they want you to remember that 3 weeks before she died, Kea became a mother, and by every account we have, she was genuinely excited about it, not overwhelmed or resentful of what motherhood was asking of her. Friends say she talked seriously about opening her own dance studio one day, specifically designed so young mothers could bring their kids along while they trained. She didn't see motherhood as something that would shrink her future. She saw it as something she'd carry into a bigger one. That future now belongs to someone else to carry forward. Iselin, Kea's daughter, will grow up without the mother who fed her and handed her off to her grandmother on what turned out to be the last ordinary morning either one of them would ever share. Somewhere right now, a family is raising a baby girl and quietly figuring out how and when and what words they'll eventually use to explain what happened to her mother. That's not a detail we're adding for effect. That's simply where this story stands today, and it's worth sitting with for a moment before we move toward closing this video. As of this video, Trayvon Wright's case is still moving through the court system. We don't have a trial date to give you, and true crime channels that promise you a clean resolution before one actually exists aren't being honest with their audience. We're not going to do that to you. When there's a real, verified update in this case, we'll bring it to you directly. That's a promise, not a tease designed to bring you back. If anything in this case has affected you personally, or if it's brought up something difficult from your own life or a relationship you've been in or watched someone close to you go through, you deserve support that goes beyond a comment section on a video. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day, confidentially, if you or someone you know ever needs it. That resource exists for exactly this reason, and we'd genuinely rather you use it than just feel unsettled and move on. What do you think Kea would want people to take away from her story? Not the crime itself, but the life she actually lived. Tell us below. We read every comment, and we sometimes feature them in follow-up videos on this case. Here's what we think stays with you after a case like this one. More than any single detail from the affidavit, Kea did everything she genuinely thought was right that morning. She chose a private, safe-feeling room in her own home instead of somewhere public. She chose to keep her family close by instead of going somewhere alone. She chose honesty over letting a rumor reach him first. And she chose to have a difficult conversation face to face instead of hiding behind a text message, because she thought he deserved that much respect, even after everything. None of that was the mistake. The danger in this case was never in what Kea did. It was entirely in what she couldn't see coming, in a decision someone else had apparently already made before he ever walked through her front door. If you want to be here when we bring you the next verified update in this case and the next story after that one, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss it when it happens. We'll be back with the next case soon. Until then, take a moment to check in with someone close to you. Don't wait for a locked door or a silence that shouldn't be there to tell them how much they actually matter to you.